Are you there? All right. Yeah, got turned on. Okay.
Hi, I'm Vivian Katz, and I'm a master gardener, and I'm taking Janae Foley's place today as host of Get It Growing. We have a guest today, Mary Corville, who's been gardening since she was knee-high to a grasshopper, as the saying goes. But first, before we start, I want to talk about a few things that are coming up in the Master Gardeners. First, we have the fall plant sale that'll be September 13th from 8 to 1 p.m. It'll be at our demonstration bed over there behind Blackham Coliseum, next to Blackham Coliseum. And we're going to have something new this year. We're going to have this trash to treasures things where master gardeners are bringing in old things that they no longer want to use in their gardening experience, and it's going to become available for purchase, kind of like a gardening garage sale. And there's a new website out there called gardenfolks.org. It's going to be specifically for gardeners in the Lafayette area, and you have to go on and register, but it's just getting started, so go on, look at it, register, and be a part of it. Be a part of gardening in Lafayette. If you have questions, there'll be somebody that can answer it for you, or maybe plant seeks and finds on there. The last thing I have to talk about is we're going to be getting a new county agent, Robert Trawick. As you've known on this show before, Stuart Gauthier has been regularly a part of our show. He was our county agent. The new Robert Trawick will be starting next Friday, and we don't know whether or not he's going to be on the show, but look for a new person to answer your gardening questions at the Ag Center. Okay, now let me introduce Mary Corville. Okay, she has been around, as I said, Lafayette forever. She was a member of the Lynch family, and they had a botanical garden out there on the Brobridge Highway, right?
Right, it's actually orchid gardens, and we tried for years to build a botanical garden because we feel that really the size of Lafayette, personally, I think that we could really
have a nice
botanical garden. And we have a lot of interest, a lot of plant interest. So you never know, there's some possibilities out there. So we just keep stirring the interest as much as we can and see what'll ball out of that pot. You never know.
Hopefully one day.
I hope so. I think there's some opportunities out there, so we'll see what's going to happen. I brought a variety of ferns to show you.
That's what we're talking about, ferns today.
Right, different kinds of things, and some are not really ferns. They're commonly called ferns. Actually, we have selaginellas, which is a group between the mosses and the ferns, and of course we brought asparagus, which is, again, not a true fern, it's an asparagus, but there are a lot of things that are called ferns, but we're going to tell you how to be successful with some of these. And when I did the Plant Lady program years ago, I know one of the most asked questions for me was, how do I save my maidenhair? You know, it's like Aunt Sue gave me a scoop out of the ground, and hers is gorgeous. She's got like 50 feet of it, and it's beautiful, but mine dies. Well,
we don't even have the normal maidenhair here, do we?
Well, I don't think we do. Actually, we brought all the strange maidenhairs, except I did bring one here just to let you see this particular one, because I tell people, I said, never give up, never say die, because as you can see on this maidenhair, you can see that all of this other foliage has died back, and that often happens. In the case of transplanting maidenhair, you often will lose the larger foliage. They can't always support it, so that's another thing, and it kills me to cut the old foliage, but see all the fiddleheads? Look at that.
And I don't think people realize that most of the time maidenhair stems are very dark to begin with.
They're black, exactly. Right. They're black or dark brown, right, depending. But anyway, this is one that's coming back to life. But I tell people, I said, most of the soils that you buy, I brought this particular soil just to show you. So you're going to look at this. It's got a lot of organic matter in it. It looks like a lot of peat moss, things like this. It's got fertilizer. It's one of these, Vivian, that supposedly will fertilize
just
for
a
3
bag,
months.
A bag of fertilizer.
Right. A standard, very good. There are a number of good fertilizers. Soils on the market. It's a regular, considered a plant potting mix. Well, what's bad is when you're going to take a fern or something that you're taking from the yard that's growing in Mother Earth, it's not typically growing in this kind of a light mix. So what's going to happen is you take that and move it into here, it's going to curl up and die on you. So what we normally do is, this is just, I put a little bit in a little Ziploc bag. This is just some typical sand with a little bit of soil mixed in it. And I like to take and mix a combination of that. And then once I put that combination together, I usually kind of dampen it and kind of squeeze it. And then when you squeeze it when it's damp, I'm not going to dampen it here because it would make a mess, but when you kind of squeeze it and it has a tendency to retain a shape, typically that'll hold enough moisture for something that's been growing outside that we've all of a sudden decided to put into a
A
pot.
pot, right.
Right, and again, we're changing location. It's used to being in that particular spot. I wouldn't recommend either getting too huge a pot because oftentimes it stays too wet, but also not too small either if you're going to be transplanting something from the yard.
Well, it's the case in any plant that your plant should fit the size of the pot.
Right, right, and oftentimes, and I'm gonna use this particular maidenhair that I broke one off at Mom's because this is one of the giant maidenhairs. And when you try to transplant a cutting of this, you brought a beautiful one here, which is a piece of the silver dollar maidenhair. And this one that Vivian brought, you could almost get away with staking this and keeping it and helping this frond survive when you transplant. In my case, this particular one is called trapeziforme. And the deal is most of trapeziforme's growths are really, they can be 3 feet tall. So the bad thing is trying to support this type of a growth and create new fiddleheads is a struggle. So it's wise to try to keep the smallest growth, which as you can see on this silver dollar, this is a relatively small growth. This one's okay too, but if it were this big, I would remove it. Even though you like to leave some foliage for it to take off better, you would remove it because these little ones will allow you to make new fiddleheads so much easier without having to support something that's just way too much energy from the root system. So it is wise when you do go to transplant maidenhairs or anything that's quite large from the yard, let's say unless you're trying to work, like I tell people, the instant gorgeous. You know, you're having a function and all of a sudden we need to make it look fabulous. Well, water the devil out of it really quick, transplant, use it for your function, and then go back and trim some of that heavy foliage.
Right.
I find they do much better that way.
And ferns are one of those things that, like, excuse me, you know, you always had those plants from your grandma that you could just stick in a pot of water, stick in the soil, and start rooting no matter what.
Right.
Ferns, you have to have a piece of the root. You have to have part of the rhizome.
Exactly. You've got to actually have a living part of it. I mean, the foliage is gorgeous, and these are beautiful to use with cut flowers. And another reason that I brought this particular one too is while we're on that subject, I think we're going to also, let's go ahead and hit on the spore side of it because that's an interesting question that a number of people will ask. And if you'll notice, if I can get this upside down for you all, if you can see this, they have little black spots on these leaves right here, which it looks like it would be, oh goodness, some sort of a disease. Well, that's not a disease by any means. That is the reproductive process. Those are actually little spore casings. And this particular fern makes just absolutely gorgeous foliage with all of a sudden when it starts to get kind of opaque and actually starts to make these little dots is when your spores are starting to form and then eventually they will fall. Wise to put a nice light medium underneath to capture some of them, or what we do, because I'm not out there to do that, is I steal a frond and I actually try to force it to drop into a dish to get some more
That's true.
going.
You could just put a light dish underneath it to catch them with a little bit of dirt.
In Mom's greenhouse, we have so many things overlapping each other that the fittest survive. I mean, that's just the way it works.
And you never know what's going to come up.
Exactly. But while we're at it, let's hit at some more of these spores because, boy, the questions that I used to get when I did this advice
That's
program.
loaded with spores.
This is one of the pyroses. It's called Pyrosa lingua. And if you look at that, I mean, it's covered just like a staghorn fern would be. As you on the other side, we have something similar, but that's spores. And I've had people to come in, bring a plant in, and they have taken a knife or a toothpick, whatever, and have scraped every bit of this disease off of this plant is what they will tell me.
Yeah, look at that one.
And you see that's covered as well.
That's amazing.
One thing you need
They always think those are insects crawling around
They think
on
it's
there.
T-scale, you know, because it does kind of resemble T-scale. But the thing about it too, Vivian, is that if you cut this type of foliage and you're using it to make some pretty arrangement in your house, be prepared that oftentimes if it's in the sporing stage, you can have all this little brown dust all over the countertop. Should you have a white covered tabletop, you're going to notice that the spores are going to drop.
Do ferns have seasons like plants do? Do they all have different seasons, such as do they usually come into
sporing stage all at the same time?
At the same time?
No, you know, I couldn't tell you that in my experience in the greenhouse, and I ran the nursery for 25 years. I don't recall there being one specific time a year.
Okay. So they all have their own times.
I think it depends on maturity of the plant itself, just like this particular plant, which I had told you I brought in too, is the Selaginellas, and they're not a moss, they're not a fern, but They're spectacular. They're one of my
This
favorites.
is one of them.
Yeah, the blue, see the blue foliage?
Right.
This particular one I collected at Mount Fuji. This is a gorgeous
Oh.
one. I left it outside. These winter well outside, semi-protected, and then even not protected. The blue one
That's another
is
one.
just gorgeous, and then also can be used like to do the base of a bonsai. It's just spectacular. But anyway, this is the sporing stage of this one. See how strange it looks? It looks like it has
Oh.
little triangular
It looks like new
growths.
leaves just opening up
Yeah,
kind of
it looks
thing.
strange. And
Yeah.
so, but I warn people when you're growing selaginellas, you have to be prepared that they're going to go through what's called the ugly stage.
So that plant over there probably, would that be the sporing stage on that maybe?
Now, you
'Cause
know,
this is the leaf for it.
I'm not so sure, but it sure does kind of give you an indication that it has little segmented areas in there. So it's very possible that it would be pockets for spores. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm
All right.
not familiar with that particular
Okay.
plant, but it does give you that hint as to it may be.
It sure does.
Right. And then, and what happens is once the spores fall, all these little jackets turn this little ugly brown. And some people say, oh God, let me water, it needs more
Or
water.
cut it off.
Right. You need to be prepared. That is going to crumble away by the wayside, and then it's going to be gorgeous again. It'll start growing again. So you just have to kind of ignore it when it goes through that stage. But there's different varieties. This is Selaginella emiliana. This one grows in a clump. We have the Arbovita that we grow here that's native.
Mhm.
I say native, I don't think it's native, but we do use it as a landscape fern. Spectacular plant.
Mhm.
And I mean, it is just beautiful. But that's something else that you can put outside, these Selaginellas. And I've been very successful. I don't have any that have not survived, with the exception of the giant Wildenovii,
Which one is that?
Wildenovii is blue. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's
Mhm.
native of Asia, and the fronds are about this long,
Oh,
say
my
2.5 feet long, and they spread out, and they're just the most magnificent blue.
Oh, I bet.
And spectacular. I've put them outside, I guess a number of years, and they have not survived. But of course, I put them outside. My stuff has to survive without petting on it. I said, I'll put it here, and you're going to do or die. So that's how it's been. So, but anyway, there are a lot of ferns that you can use outside. The holly fern is one. This is one right here, and that's one we showed spores of earlier.
Mhm.
But I want to also, Vivian and I were also talking about, you got to remember, ferns don't like the sun. I did this on purpose. This is 2 days of sun for a fern who is not in the sun at all. So this is true sunburn. You merely remove that frond. It'll come out again. It's not going to die. But we do want to recommend to any of you that are listening that most ferns are semi-shade lovers.
Which ferns would you say take the most sun?
I've seen asparagus in the bleak,
Asparagus.
yeah, which is not a true fern.
Autumn
It's an asparagus, right? The autumn
I think
fern.
autumn ferns
I've
do. I
seen
think
some-
leatherleaf might. What do you think?
Well, to an extent. I've
Yeah.
never seen it in the full hot sun because I
No.
find it's used for usually with cut flowers, and so you want the length on the foliage,
Right.
and so typically
That's
it gets
more
shorter.
shade, right.
But one thing you brought a piece, and I don't see it right here. That Japanese painted fern, I've seen that in
Oh,
quite a bit
what did we
of
do?
sun. We put it somewhere in
Here
here.
it
I've
is.
lost it. Right, I've seen that in quite a bit of sun.
Really?
So, but how much will it stand full hot sun? I don't typically
But
put very
if you
many.
have a spot that has a little bit more sun than shade,
Right.
there are some that will do better
There are some, and there's
Right.
some that will acclimate. So if you'll do it
Mhm.
slowly, it's just like us. When you sunburn, they sunburn. So give them a chance to migrate into that
Okay.
sun. You know,
I
they
guess
can.
even if you plant them, if you shade them a little bit and gradually keep the shade off of them a little bit more each day. I
Right.
don't know, that might
Right,
help.
kind of a part.
Right.
Now this is also one that's very common too, and this is the Boston, and they have these little globules at the base. This is merely food storage. These are not diseases. That's another
Let's
thing
see if
too
I
that
can
transplants beautifully.
So,
And I have seen these in
those
quite
are
a bit of
there's our
sun.
globules there.
Right, see, that just makes like little balls of food storage, but don't worry. And I've also seen these in pretty much sun, Vivian, in pots of sun. So, and I'm talking about 2/3 of the day sun.
Right.
Short, full, absolutely gorgeous. A pretty one you brought today, I think, is really spectacular. It's different. It looks a little bit chlorotic, but it's absolutely gorgeous.
Actually,
when
that's
you
the
mix
name of
with
it. It's
green.
a chartreuse fern. It's not
It's
chlorotic.
really
I mean, it's
pretty.
supposed to be like that.
But it's
I
different.
picked it up in our greenhouse. So it would be a beautiful contrast, especially with those blue ones.
It's
Can you
gorgeous.
imagine?
Really, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I think it's gorgeous. You know, everything's got its place. Well, look, put it next to that Blechnum too. Look at the nice
Look at
contrast.
this. This
Isn't
is a
that
nice one. Is this something that would grow in the ground?
Actually, the Blechnums are not real hardy and they're fairly rare, so I've never taken the chance of even leaving it outside because I would hate to lose it.
Looks like it's related to is it the Australian tree?
Like the tree ferns.
Right,
it really reminds you of a tree fern.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting thing too of this fern behind it, I'm sure a lot of you have staghorn ferns, is the staghorn fern makes its own leaf mold. Many people don't realize that this ugly brown back starts green, and then what happens is that green will actually turn brown, decay, and if you actually cut this apart and dissected this, you would notice that little fingery roots that actually go through here, and as that decays, it actually consumes itself. It produces spores on the end here, and it also produces, I saw a spore here, some right here, so that is not a disease. See, that's the
that's
spores.
Amazing.
Right, and then it's going to create its own leaf mold that actually hangs onto the trees as the trash falls from whether the birds or whatever, the wind blows, whatever, as it falls, these sterile fronds back here trap the trash, and that actually absorbs the moisture to support these reproductive fronds on the end here.
So you really don't need a lot of soil for this, do you?
No, actually you don't need a lot of soil. I brought that one because the only one I could find that had, it had spores on the end, but typically you can have it in a pot, you can mount it on plain wood. I've seen it on 1x8 sheets of wood even.
And they get massive.
Oh my God, and in the wire baskets, they're spectacular. I've transplanted them for customers and I needed saws. I actually used regular saws to separate them because they get so large.
Well, and if it gets too large, you have a hard time moving them around.
Protecting them from freezing because they will freeze.
Right.
Now they do make kikis on the side. They'll make a little green pad. The little green pad will produce more little sterile fronds. And then what happens is it will just continue to multiply and it'll encompass the whole basket. You'll lose it completely. You won't see it at all. So that's a great plant. I love the staghorn ferns. It's one of my favorite families. And there's a number of kinds. There's some different ones. There's not just one kind. Yes.
Yeah, this one looks like it has, well,
it has the big long fronds.
Long leaves, right? I've seen the
fingery,
short, fatter ones that look like elephant ears or something, you know.
Right, but as you can see, they call that staghorn, and then this one they call elkhorn. And as you can see,
elkhorn.
See how it has this different kind of a crested deal, more like an elk would have, a crested antler. So you see, this is a different one altogether, and this is actually in the Polypodium family, and of course the staghorn I think is Platycerium. So there's so many different families for the different ferns and so many epiphytes.
Right.
This is that pyrosa.
This one will grow will that one grow in the ground?
No, this one is not. This one is not hardy.
This is full
but I
of
think
spores.
you said that this one will. Didn't you?
That one does grow in the ground, yes.
And they're both epiphytic in a sense, but yet they can be grown in pots as well. So the ferns there's so many, it's just unbelievable. You can have so much fun and break the rules.
Right, and if you have a large shady yard, you could really get carried away.
Exactly.
Many things grow like this will grow in the ground.
Now, what's nice about it too is if you have a fairly protected area, you know what I mean. You don't have to have something that is completely encompassed in coverage.
Right.
You'd be surprised how much cold many of these will stand. I know in the Selaginellas, I've seen them in snow. I know that these adiantums like this particular one, I absolutely love this. I've had this in the ground for 15 years. And it is spectacular, and I do absolutely nothing to it at all. Yes, that is it.
This one.
Right, that's
this one in the ground.
Yeah, see, now yours is silver dollar.
Right, and they both.
And yours is in the ground, and this is Trapeziforme.
That'll grow in the ground,
right, and this in the ground at my house is probably about 3 feet. My biggest frond
mine's
is 3
just
feet.
starting, so it's
right, but actually spectacular.
Right.
Oh yeah, there's just, you know, to me there's
and you know
no
I did bring in
ferns.
I have a bronze. We have the bronze maiden here too. The bronze.
Right, there's
pretty little.
There's
plant.
also one that's used as there's a variegated one that's white. It's got white stripes in it.
Oh.
Maidenhair. It's not real common, and it's a very slow grower. So as I tell them, a watch pot never boils. So you have to just kind of put it in the corner, kind of play like you didn't see it for a while, and then all of a sudden it's a wow. It's really pretty. We also have the macho fern, which I think you brought a piece and I brought a piece of too.
Over there.
Let's see here. This is something else too that you have to realize whenever you're transplanting, just like we mentioned, whenever you're transplanting, and I left the ugly fronds on this, is you've got good new growth here. Of course, we have a volunteering little ivy trying to come in here, but you cut the ugliness off, and let the new growth come through. Should we decide that we're having a function, we're having a party that evening, and we've got to take something out of the ground like a woods fern or
I don't think
something
people
like
realize
that.
how well this grows in the ground because they just see it in baskets
Oh.
everywhere, and this grows so well
it's
in the ground.
spectacular.
It covers
It's
nicely.
lush, and what's nice about it too is if you want to make it really impressive, you can take an elevated pot, and we've done this before to decorate for functions. Is let's take that macho fern, and let's say you've got a good area that's about 4 or 5, 6 feet of where the foliage is coming up. Take a nice either decorative pot or even a plain terracotta with something with reds or pinks or anything, and just drop it in the middle, and you'd be surprised. It looks like you've had a special design for the function you're having for that evening, or if you're having let's say you're hosting a dinner party or something like that. That's another thing that ferns are great for as well. Is I love to use them for tabletop. You know, if you want to put something on the table and just combine a bunch of plants, as you can see, these blues, you've got blues and greens, and here's a little pink, here's a Fittonia. You can take a number of different things. The Rex begonia family is absolutely spectacular. You can mix them, and they make a great centerpiece, something that you can use to add
that's
color.
true. That's true. You know, oftentimes people don't realize that, you know, a fern might be a very good thing all by itself. A bunch of little potted ferns just down the table, all different kinds of it. Just the different textures would be a very nice centerpiece too.
Right. I've seen someone use just one single bow and solid fern foliage.
Tell me about this.
Now that, I brought it, I don't even know what it is. I really don't know what it is, but my mom has orchid gardens, and as anybody that knows, she's been there since 1955. I ripped this off the rafters, okay? The rafters.
This is a fern,
Yes,
huh?
it's a fern, and as you can see, it was just growing up the rafter. I think it even has a little slug friend, a snail friend with it. But anyway, the deal is that it was growing up on the rafters, and it was just taking off from the ground and just making all of this foliage. So I said, well, let me go ahead and take that off. But I have to tell you another thing about it, though. Look at this. Isn't that interesting? It makes little ferns wherever it touches.
Oh, my gosh.
Or if it doesn't touch, because this is hanging in the air. But this is a whole new plant. We could break that off. And Vivian, you can take that home, and that'll be a new thing for you. Look, you're right. See that?
That's amazing.
And that'll start another fern, and it'll just keep on going. Now, how much cold will this stand? I couldn't tell you. I've only had it in the greenhouse. But it'll be a fun thing to try.
It'd be a good thing to experiment with, you know?
Exactly. And then we can tell other people about it. So we'll be able to let them know whether or not it'll survive outside, because that I couldn't tell you. I really don't know that one.
I was going to ask you to talk about the Japanese trailing from the cell,
Okay.
this thing, because people see this in their yard, and I think sometimes you just need to watch where you put it. It has its uses, but
right. Now this is what they call,
not quite the one in the yard too.
No. This is really actually one that is called peacock fern, and it's truly a selaginella.
Right.
I have planted it at home because I knew it did well for my mom, and it's actually crawling on the outside of her greenhouse 3 feet up.
Okay, so is this related to that Japanese climbing fern?
No, not at all. Not at all. Even though it gives you a similar look.
Is that a fern?
No, actually, it's in between the mosses and the ferns.
The Japanese climbing fern?
Oh, no, that one I think is a fern.
Is a fern.
This particular one is
isn't.
different. This is a selaginella.
Right.
But I have this so thick at home, it is unbelievable. I actually have this growing in between the rocks. It's coming out on the concrete.
That would be beautiful.
It is spectacular. You should see the blue. I mean, the blue is just dynamite. And then I have the chocolate plants coming out of the middle of that, and the chocolate plant is cocoa colored.
Yes, I have
And then
those.
it has the lavender little flowers on it. So you talk about gorgeous, and they just
I was going to
volunteered.
ask you one last thing. I don't know how much time we have, but what would you suggest to keep your ferns happy in the yard once you've planted them? Is there anything besides, making sure they don't dry out? Is there anything that you fertilize them with, or apply to them, fish emulsion or something else, or what?
Well, I tell you what, I think everyone has a preference on fertilizers, Vivian, and you know what I mean? It depends on which one you like. My personal feeling is I used to like, and they don't call it that anymore, mirror acid. Usually that type of fertilizer I would go ahead and use on any kind of plants and ferns or whatever I had outside. I've gotten to where now I alternate. I usually use a balanced fertilizer,
like
whether it's Peters or but I'm talking about a liquid fertilizer.
Right.
I every now and then go through with a granular 13-13-13 and throw it everywhere. Then I hose down quickly, and then I do different things because I think it's important that we realize that sometimes it's just like things can get stymied, and it's like, well, they're not doing enough. So I'll change the fertilizer.
Yeah, give it a little boost.
Exactly. Sometimes I'll throw a granular in there. Sometimes I'll throw in a liquid, and then oftentimes I'll even throw in whether it's a camellia fertilizer or a high bloom fertilizer. I'll alternate, and I water on, and I try to do it to everything, ferns included. And I've had tremendous success because my blooming things bloom more, they bloom longer,
Right.
and then of course my ferns give me much more lush greenery.
Is there a special time of year where you would say do not do any of that, or go ahead and best time to do it?
Well, in Southwest Louisiana, we kind of can break the rules because it's so warm, but I would recommend if we know there's some cold weather coming on, don't push them to push new growth, because you know it's going to scorch your new growth.
Then don't do it in the fall.
That's pretty obvious, yeah.
Right,
But otherwise,
spring.
I do it almost like every other watering. I mean, because I just like it, and everything blooms so much better, and I get to enjoy a lot more color, and of course my ferns go ballistic, so I can share pieces with other people. I like to pass along idea, so.
Oh, I do too. Yeah. So.
One thing too I brought was this guide I wanted to show you too, Vivian, and this is something that we put together.
That's a beautiful cover.
Called Botanicals on the Bayou. Actually, Pat Soper is our illustrator, and I just love Pat. He's a super talented guy, and as you can see, he helped us do the cover. And inside, of course, we've got information about birds, when the hummingbirds come in, what's the recipe, what month do you do what, and what's great about this is generic. You never have to worry. The years don't change. Because we did week 1, week 2, week 3, then let's say I can pass